So with 4 days to go of the transfer window, although that does include the recording time, by the time it's out, it'll be 3 days to go. And we know things can change drastically in that one day. We thought we'd have a go at discussing the transfer window Arsenal have had, but more importantly, what to expect from these next 3 days. Lots of names are flying around, whether it be journalists, ITKs, or just speculation, or just what fans want to see. So we're going to discuss some of those names. And I've I invited two people who, when it comes to knowing players, who either I might have heard the name, I might have seen them on Football Manager, or maybe I've never heard the name. These guys are experts. So we've got the amazing Ben Mattinson and the amazing George as well. George, I'm not flying in with I just know you as George AFC. What's the surname? Round of applause for everyone. You don't have to unveil the surname, of course. Just George, or is there...
George Voutzis, I don't mind. I'm on media enough. Yeah, I'm sure you may have seen me along with Alex on the Canon podcast. So we've been doing that, and yeah, I love Arsenal. Love scouting, throwing in my own vague name every now and then on Twitter, throwing scouting threads. So I'm excited. I do believe there's a player out there. I never believe you only need one name, and I always believe there is someone out there that can help you. So that's kind of my mentality to it. So I'm excited to talk possibilities.
Totally agree. And it's a fantastic series as well. The Scouter series you have on the Canon podcast, lots of content there as well. And Ben, I mean, we've only ever interacted via Twitter. I mean, that's actually true of you, George, but this is the first time we're all kind of sharing a recording space together. But Ben, how are you, mate? And welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Good. I'm just trying to keep up with everything that's changing every day. But there's so much going on, and just trying to throw some names out there ahead of time, but let's hope we get the rest of it right, you know?
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, and I know you all do know, the listeners, Ben will deliver threads of players, and then 6 months later we sign them. So Calafiori, there was one on Mikel Merino, wasn't there? I'm sure there was.
It's someone I've spoken about a while ago, yeah. I'm not doing like a full-on thread about him, but it's been about for ages.
And I remember a couple of days ago we linked to Skov Olsen, and I thought, we might get him. And then you went and sort of shared a thread. I went, welcome to Arsenal. We found our winger, people. We'll go in. What's that, sorry?
I say it's a bit weird when that happens. The worst part is it's been only Chelsea before, and now it's actually Arsenal. It's quite nice. Not Chelsea buying all the players I've spoken about. Yeah.
Well, you should be charging them. But Sharoy as well, welcome back to the amazing podcast. How's everything going over on Sharoy's Voice? Because there's content going up, so now you don't have to feel guilty about sending subscribers there as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm there weekly, and honestly, the response has been so humbling and so heartwarming. I didn't expect that at all. And we were discussing the podcast off air, James and myself, and I think we're going with effing hell, just someone decent, please, for this one, right? That's what we're going for.
That, yeah, it's a working title. Yeah, there's a few drafts of it. We might fill out the word effing, but we'll see. We'll see how desperate it gets in the window. Look, I'm going to start quite general. I know everyone wants us to fly straight into, well, who's out there, who we signed, what do you think of these players? I think we've got to build into it. Because I think to understand how desperate we are for that forward or that wing or whatever it is we think we need to address, we need to understand how well we've done so far in the market. And so I think my first question, and I'll fly to you, George, on this, Calafiori, Merino in. Let me add that. So Calafiori, Merino in, Smith Rowe, Vieira, and Nketiah out. Are Arsenal better equipped to beat Man City to the title this year than they were last year?
100%. I think that you would be disingenuous to say that they weren't. One of my biggest catchphrases of this summer, though, has been, my goal personally has been, I would like us to say Arsenal will win the Premier League next season, as opposed to Arsenal can win the Premier League next season. And transitioning from that can to will has been the goal of my personal window. And do I believe with what we've done at present in the current moment at, I forget what time it is in UK for me, but Tuesday, August 27th, I don't know if I've been able to make that transition and that leap. Now, in terms of some of the business, there's some really good aspects of this window. You talk about it, I think we've got something like £87 million accrued in sales in total when you start to add up the Tavares, the Amari sell-ons, the Mark McGuinnesses, everything in. And I think when you start to add it up, about £77 million of the 87 have been on pure profit, which if you're trying to evaluate the selling pillar, we've done quite well. I don't think individually some of these deals we maybe could have got a little bit more. For example, Eddie, I feel, is an asset that maybe is a little bit more than £30 million, but the market dictates what your price is. And so I think we've got a good deal there. I wouldn't say it's bad. I wouldn't say it's great. It's a good deal. And then I think when you look at Emile Smith-Rowe, that deal, again, in isolation, is actually a fairly good deal in terms of what we've seen from a playing perspective. But then again, I think when you start to transition into maybe some of the buys and you look at Calafiori, who for me represents both a floor and ceiling raising signing, potentially, that's a really exciting signing, not just in terms of what he can offer now, but what he could offer in the future. And then you look at Mikel Merino, who for me, I've gone on Twitter and saying an imperfect player that could be a perfect role fit for Arsenal, where he's been an extremely experienced player, one that's been around for quite a while, and someone that I think could do the Xhaka role better than what Xhaka did. And if you're looking at that point, you're looking at a left-hand side fluidity that has been fixed the last part of the window, which is something that I kind of coined at the beginning of the summer as transitional inevitability for me, which really simply was broken down into, can we be efficient in transition? Can we maximize the moments in the final third? Because Arsenal are actually one of the best teams in the world, not just the Premier League, at entering the box, at entering the final third. And for us, making sure that we capitalize on moments like Bayern, making sure that we capitalize on moments like Porto, Villa, Fulham, West Ham, the mid-block problem, these things, for me, had been a forward missing gap. And until we get that, I don't think I can check mark the window 8 or 9 out of 10. So right now, I'm in the case of saying, okay, I think we've done better than I thought we would have in terms of selling players at the start of the window. And I think we've done a really good job at fixing 2 out of the 3 main pillars I wanted at minimum on incomings. So maybe a 7 out of 10. And I'm kind of in the middle right now saying it's been a good window, not a great window, and not a bad window, but a good window so far.
Yeah, I think that's where I am. What about you, Ben? I mean, I know Calafiori is a player that you recommended a while back. As we mentioned, he's also a player that supposedly Arsenal were really looking at a while back. He came to the Arsenal Crystal Palace game in the 5-0 win. I mean, that's one way to sell it to him, isn't it? But it just goes to show, when Arsenal fans are complaining, and I'm one of them, about how long these deals take, they take long for us, but think how long they're taking for the player and the manager, because there is such a long process to ensure you get the right character and that they get the right almost nurturing before they arrive to make them understand like why they're wanted, what their place is, to really kind of make them feel connected. I mean, all these rumours doing the round that Arteta just had Mikel Merino and his wife or someone round for dinner last night. It's like, there's so much that goes in, and to some people it's like, yeah, who cares, just pay the money, get the player we need in. But all these things add to the greater culture. So aside from all that, I just went on a random tangent for listeners really there, but Calafiori, you're happy about that deal, I imagine, but also the window in general. You feel Arsenal are stronger? Do you feel that we've caught up to City enough, or has the signing of Gundogan of Savinho ultimately helped maintain that gap? I mean, how do you see it?
Yeah, I think those signings they've made have also been quite good for them in terms of Pep. At the moment, he's at a point where he's got this really direct wingers that are going to allow him to not necessarily have to rely on Rodri so early and Foden. So they've got moments from other places. So that's a little bit of a worry. But I would say, I think right now, I agree with George, I think it's a good window so far. If you get a decent winger in, that's still probably 8 out of 10. But to make it a 10 out of 10, it's going to need a bigger name, maybe a striker as well, or a more higher profile winger. But I do really like the signings that we've made. I think they're both not the ones that are going to get fans like massively excited, but they're really functional for what we need in our system. I think Calafiori is a bit uncomfortable, but I think he could challenge Gabriel even. I think Gabriel's got a proper challenger now as opposed to Kivior, who he probably thought there's too big of a gap between the two of them. But Calafiori gets him a bit nervous and needs to work on some of the stuff on the ball because he offers so much more. And a left back as well. Now you've got so many options there, even though at one point last season it was like we were playing Kivior, then we were playing Zinchenko and weren't really happy with they were both okay, but there's weaknesses within both of them. And now we've got Timber coming back, who's like a new signing.
But he is. He really is.
It really is, though. And then the guys coming through, like Nwaneri and Lewis Skelly. I think Lewis Skelly is probably going to be a second half of the season. He might start getting played. But Nwaneri, I think he'll have quite a bit of a role within the team. I think he's probably Vieira's replacement. And I don't think a lot of the time people compare like minutes and they're like, so Nwaneri is only going to get this amount of minutes that Vieira got, but he didn't trust Vieira and didn't trust Smith Rowe. Whereas if he trusts Nwaneri, he might play him a lot more. So yeah, right now I'd say good, and it's got to a point where City haven't pulled away. We also haven't pulled away. We can win with this, but there needs to be a little more. I think with potential outgoing still to happen, we might end up being short if we don't bring at least, I would say 2 in, but at least 1.
Wow, does that include the goalkeeper fee?
So I'd say outside of the keeper, if we were to get at least the winger, but I feel like potentially 2, I would say. But I'd settle if we got a good winger at least.
Do you think Arsenal are working on 2?
I don't know.
I know.
Yeah, I think we've. Yeah, no. I would say there's definitely 1 at least, and there's probably so many options that we've looked at in attack, keeping our options open. I think with all of it was all about who can we get out first to make space in the squad, and we've probably had personal terms agreed or close to agreed, spoken with clubs. So when we've got the player out, we can just trigger all of those. So I'd say the keeper and a winger is probably what I would expect. I would like possibly another one, but yeah, that's probably how I would word it.
Yeah, sure. Where are you with all that?
I was listening intently throughout, and I started thinking about this idea that we might be able to go from Arsenal can win the Premier League to Arsenal will win the Premier League with a signing or a window. And other than Mbappe, I'm not entirely sure that there would have been a signing that would have made me sit there and go, we will win the Premier League just because of who we're up against. I'm not sure that any transfer window, aside from getting that level of generational greatness, would have made me feel that way. And part of that is because, as ridiculous as this might sound, I think for Arsenal to be able to say we will win the league, Arsenal have to win the league. It's the domino effect. You need the first one to fall before you can start really believing that it's going to arrive, particularly because of the fact that we've been so close for so long. And then there's also this notion, I think it was you, Ben, you were saying we haven't quite pulled away and City haven't quite pulled away either, right, in the window. I mean, obviously we all completely understand that winning the transfer window is slightly irrelevant. You need only look at Chelsea when they signed Caicedo or Lavia or whoever, and they were laughing at Liverpool, and look at the season that Liverpool had, right? They didn't win the transfer window, but they were a much better team. But I'm sort of in this position now where I'm trying to convince myself, and not quite convince myself, but if you go back and listen to one of the earlier Goonerverse pods, I kind of felt that because of the tournaments over the summer, because of the increased financial regulation, because of that whole landscape, I felt as though the slightly easier signings to get done would in fact be the ones that are done early. Not quite like Declan Rice, done right at the beginning of the window last year, right? And I always quietly felt, well, not quietly, I mean, I articulated it, that the big signing, the head-turning player would be the more difficult one, but would arrive at the end of the window. And I'm still quietly hoping that is the case, because I completely agree that if Ramsdale goes, we need a replacement, fine. I completely agree that it might be Ethan who steps into that Vieira role, but in all honesty, I always saw Vieira as the slightly more natural backup to Ødegaard. I never quite understood him as Saka backup, right? If Ødegaard's out, I'm not entirely sure you can rely upon Ethan to fill the captain's boots week in, week out. So that is an area that ultimately no one's really talking about in terms of addressing, but I don't think we have the most natural, experienced fit there. I think it's the winger. I think it will only be one signing. I'd love to, my God, I would love to, but I'm strongly leaning towards this notion that they want someone who can perhaps challenge Martinelli and Trossard for that starting position on the left, and someone who's well versed at playing on the right in the event they want to rotate Saka. And I don't think they'd mind spending big money on that. Looking at the reasons as to why I think they spent big money on Rice, the idea that he can play the 6 and the 8, I think they don't mind almost apportioning the fee across 2 positions when they're satisfied that you can do it well. And I'm probably, now that Vieira's gone and Smith Rowe's gone, as convinced as I have been this window that signing has to come in.
Yeah, I'm more convinced than ever before. I think I know you're back, Troy, so I thought we'd maybe lost you for a sec there, internet-wise. But I'm going to do something I very rarely do. I'm going to disagree with Shiroi. This could be the last podcast we ever do together. I don't think it has to be Mbappe for that forward signing to make me think we're going to win the league. I think, look, I don't know. I like Simon Adingra, but I don't know if adding Adingra makes me think we're going to win the league. But I think adding Nico Williams, I think adding Raphinha, I think there's a few names out there. Well, certainly there were early in the window, Pedro Neto when he was available. I think because of the quality, the difference that they would have added to our squad, and the depth, I think I would have started. Listen, I probably would have been wrong, but I think I would have sat on season predictions and previews going, no, Arsenal are going to win the league. This is the year we're going to do it if we'd had that player in. So I think that player does exist. But let me open the floor now, and obviously everyone come in at this point, and let's start to talk about some names. Because, George, I saw you nodding along there. Did you feel that, and do you feel that there are names out there that do not close the gap, leapfrog? That's what we're looking to do.
Look, I'm not going to hide. I've said it from June. I thought Victor Osimhen was a name I looked at in general in terms of what we missed and also a compliment to our team. Whatever forward that we do sign, I've been very insistent, must be a selfless forward out of possession. Must be a forward that is willing to do hard yards and incorporate in the press. That list starts to narrow down quite a few of the topics that we really talked about in terms of even your Leaos, your Marcus Rashfords, even your dream signings. It really makes it a narrow list when you start to say, can they fit out of possession? Then I started to ask myself, who gives me a box presence? Somebody that will dominate the 6-yard box, that will change our complexion in that area, who will dominate the channels, who will give us an ability to kind of create these transition moments and turn them into a level of efficiency in the box that Arsenal seem to be lacking, which has been echoed by Mikel in multiple times. And then I start to ask myself, okay, how do I change Arsenal in terms of adding maybe a level of half space crossing to the back post, which we seem not to do last year? Who would give me that level of aerial dominance to really start to say that's a weapon? We can start to change things up when things aren't going our way. And, I'm describing Victor Osimhen to me in terms of check, 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 check. I can almost list you 5 different plays. I feel strongly Victor Osimhen will score 5 goals in, whether it's through set pieces, whether it's through a back post cross to Martin Odegaard and Bukayo Saka, whether it's in the channels, whether it's through cutbacks, whether it's through even offering himself as an ability to move a mid-block deep. This whole idea that we struggled with a mid-block, and what does someone with Victor Osimhen's threat on the counter do? Can Man City operate like they did last year at the Etihad and be that high up with a Victor Osimhen on the shoulder? I'm not too sure. And that's even ignoring the whole idea of what he offers in build-up in terms of an outlet from David Raya, in terms of how that changes the complexion of how Arsenal can play. So for me, he represented a solution to many problems that Arsenal had in the window. Now, again, I'm also not someone that thinks it has to be one name. He was my favorite name because I felt him available. I felt him, especially as the price has gone down now, reasonable in terms of we're talking at least under his release clause. We're looking at least under £85 million. Yeah. And we're looking at a player who, by the way, has won the league, who is prime age and knows what it takes to get there. And those were important to me. All those metrics in terms of having an experienced player, someone who's been there and done it, someone who's offering something different and solving things that this team doesn't have. That's a tough package to do. And I felt that he solved more of the missing parts of Arsenal than he did the cons as a player, because he's not perfect. And I think the reason that we have such debate, not to go into a rant, is because that perfect player doesn't exist. We as fans need to stop thinking that we're going to buy a flawed player. And we need to accept that. It's a matter of how many of these flaws can Arsenal support? And how much does that player solve?
And I think the biggest point with Osimhen is that I think he'd look great in the number 14 shirt. sorry to cut through with absolute nonsense analysis, but I mean that would look good, wouldn't it? Osimhen 14. I see it. I can see it.
I'm starting a petition to retire that shirt now. I'm not having that shirt desecrated at all. That shirt needs to sit on the shelf for at least 5 years, please.
Yeah, but it's done now, isn't it? Like, let's be honest. Like, Aubameyang, fair play, you did your bit. Walcott scored a few goals, but I mean, and Eddie was a trier, don't get me wrong, but let's be honest, no one was going to beat Thierry Henry. He should have been retired there and then. Especially because 14 is not like that. No one's that keen on that number. Do you know what I mean? No one's ever. It's a good number, but it's not like
it's an Arsenal niche number.
You take it because of Henry. You take it because of Henry. That's why people take it. It's a recipe for disaster. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, no. I was just saying people at other clubs do as well because of Henry. Like, we've still got that carrying on for however long.
Yeah. I've seen Mateta tuck in the shirt with a number 40. I know what he's doing. And by the way, I would take him. No, I'm joking. But we've got a few more names to go through before we get to Mateta. Maybe there's a swap deal there. But I do make a great point on Osimhen. The reason I was so excited about having you two on is because I'm so intensely following Arsenal and reading data and watching the highlights back and whatever, and absorbing everything. But I'm just not like that really outside the Premier League. Even within the Premier League, it's kind of the bigger clubs and it trickles down. But you guys have such kind of knowledge of these other clubs and other players. So with Osimhen, other than his goal record and what people have talked about, and I watch all your content and I read your tweets and everything, my feeling is, he seems a really good fit, but okay, maybe he's got more flaws than perhaps I realised. We're now talking about a player that's probably available. I mean, you're saying under 85 million. I think he might be available for like 65, 70. I think it's got that lower than that. Napoli.
What's 290K when you end up transferring it after tax in Italy, because they start doing that weird tax consideration, but it does work out to about 290K pounds a week, which when you start to say, is Victor Osimhen worth it for the money that we bought Kai Havertz on the same wage that we bought Kai Havertz?
Probably. But then that Kai Havertz salary might be twisting it might be distorting it slightly, but I hear you. What Ben, were you Osimhen? Like, would you hit the red button tomorrow for 70 million and bring him in?
Yeah. It's just a straightforward answer. I think he has one thing that not many, I don't think we've got in our front line, which is the fear factor. Like, I think everyone talks about the whole in the tunnel and everything, but it's true. If you're a defender and you look and you're against Trossard, Martinelli, Havertz is one of those ones that I think his reputation and his performance on a line. So I don't think people fear coming up against Havertz. Saka's the main one, but even Saka, we know Saka isn't rated as high as he actually, how important he is for us. But I think with someone like Osimhen, he creates that instant fear factor that sometimes what's happened with Haaland is he's like made an assist without actually assisting anyone. He's just made a run and pulled defenders out of the way. It's because the defenders are like, I've got to stay close to him. Then Foden just arrives in that space, massive space, and scores. And we don't really have many that can do that. Havertz is an addition, and we saw how much his facilitating can do. But the one thing I like about Osimhen is he's just like, he'll do everything to score. He'll throw his body at the ball. Some of these injuries that he's had, when people speak about his injury record, they're freak injuries. Some of them it's because he's just thrown his body at the ball and then he's crashed heads with someone or something like that. But there's no one I can see in our team doing that. If the ball's up at an awkward angle, who's really got that desire to score? A lot of our guys in front of goal, they'll take an extra touch or try to go around the keeper to win a penalty, or whatever it is, it's normally something more straightforward. And he's the type he'll shoot from any angle, shoot from distance, or he's got really good ball striking as well. So I think we need someone like that, but there aren't very many. Is the issue.
What's interesting is we're all talking about strikers here, Sharoy. That immediately gives, I imagine, Gabby Jesus another role in the squad. Now, I recognise Havertz could drop to left central midfield. Weirdly, I think there's this bloody thumbs up thing that always happens on. I need to disable that somehow. But I think Havertz and the way Marino's going to play in the left 8 might be a little bit more comparable than people think, like when it actually happens. I don't know. I just feel the ghosting to the back post, it'd be different. It'd be different in a lot of ways because I think, Marino obviously has got slightly more natural six tendencies for Havertz, but I can imagine Arteta at times being quite happy to move Havertz to left 8 for some games. And then Jesus can obviously play wide, but adding a striker means that those two are going to be a little bit more used in those other positions, I imagine. Whereas adding a winger who can play on both sides, there is that where you're giving Saka rest while Martinelli is not on form, while Trossard is better off the bench. You can almost come up with kind of more excuses. That's why I've always felt, and I've sort of been resigned to in the last, probably since mid-July, that it's going to be a winger, if anyone, that we had. But Osimhen maybe feels the better fit. I mean, where are you with it, Sharoy? I mean, is it if you had a choice to get your right winger or your right striker, which one would you get?
Right striker. And I say that because I'm far more convinced as to the ceiling of our striker, of our wingers, than I am with the ceiling of our strikers. And I'm talking about raising the ceiling of Arsenal Football Club to, as you said, leapfrog Manchester City, right? And I've always felt that, look, Gabby Jesus, as much as he wanted to be the 9 and wanted to be the main man and wanted to be the goal scorer, ultimately, look, there's a reason why Pep Guardiola used to play him off the right a lot more than he did down the middle. One, it was because for the vast majority of his career, he had a proper striker in Aguero in front of him. But also it's because he has natural attributes to be able to occupy the wing, when in actual fact, the most important attribute to operate down the middle, put the ball in the back of the net, is something that in terms of his ratio and in terms of his sort of clinical finishing, I think we'd all have to accept that that's just not in his locker anymore. We can see and hope and say it might arrive, but I'm looking at well over half a decade's worth of football here now and saying that his goal scoring ratio isn't quite what it ought to be for your main front man. And I completely agree with this notion that there is no perfect player and there will always be a downside, right? I mean, lest we forget, when Erling Haaland was signed, everyone was saying, well, he's not going to fit into the Guardiola system. What a terrible City signing. How they don't play with a striker. He's not great off the ball. Breaks the goal scoring record, they win the treble, everyone shuts up, right? I mean, there's always an argument to be made as to why someone's not the perfect fit, but that's not realistic. And you can look back at so many of the signings that we brought in under Arteta. Remember, instead of Odegaard, it should have been Maddison, because Odegaard was the flop wonder kid. Do you remember Ben White from where for that price? Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, he's not going to bring Saliba back in, is he? I mean, he clearly doesn't like him. He's just going to sell him. He can't be all that if he's on loan. Now, I could keep going. There are always so many arguments as to why a player is not a good fit until they are. Now, Osimhen for me is a really interesting one, because there was a time where, around the time that Harry Kane moved, where it was Kane and Osimhen as the two best strikers in the world after Haaland. That was common consensus, popular opinion. Memories are short. Football fans are fickle. He has a pretty poor AFCON. Suddenly, everyone just doesn't think he's anywhere near the level. And I feel the same way to an extent about Ivan Toney. Ivan Toney breaks the championship goal scoring record, comes up, has a fantastic season with Brentford. Everyone's looking at Ivan Toney and saying, listen, I don't understand why one of the big clubs aren't in for him. If Ivan Toney gets a move, particularly to a club like Arsenal, he's exactly the type of forward that they don't have and could tip them over the edge in the games where their traditional plan A isn't working. Suddenly, Ivan Toney's not quite good enough. Time to learn Arabic after your betting scandal, mate. You can go off to Saudi. I do think that there has to be an element of realism that if there was a player in there all of 12 to 18 months ago, that player cannot simply have disappeared. And these are very, very viable frontline options. My thought process when I say it'll be the winger is, one, I do feel as though there are just more wingers out there that are slightly more attainable when you've left yourself, 3 or 4 days? Because you're probably rivaling far less suitors. You're not going to be in a bidding war. But the other reason, and this reason actually pisses me off, is the reason I asked about Osimhen's wage is because we're talking about him then being our highest paid player. Sticking to this level of wage structure, with the greatest of respect, I mean, I know I'm going to sound like Turkish V2 here, but that's not what we were told was going to be the case ultimately. There has to come a point where if you think you can get someone that can take you over the edge to get that major, you pay him. You absolutely pay him, as long as it's not, 750 grand a week or something that's going to, cripple the club. I'm not suggesting that. But if Marcus Rashford at Manchester United, who are sort of languishing wherever the hell they're going to end up. I mean, if they can regularly pay 300 grand a week to a number of players, why can't we do it for one or two that we think would get us over the line, right? And that's why I think Osimhen ought to be the fit. I don't think the wage ought to be prohibitive at all. And I think that his addition could be determinative. And that's why I'm just so surprised that he's still knocking about and no one really knows what's going on, despite PSG and Saudi, the money men, almost pulling out of the race. I find it really bizarre. And that's why I'm glad you guys are here, because you're so much more clued up than me in terms of the landscape. I'd love for you to be able to offer a reason as to why this guy hasn't moved yet.
Yeah, and Chelsea, another one. I mean, why haven't they been able to pick up Osimhen yet?
Yeah, I mean, I can probably take a stab. For me, I think it's about the player demanding his Champions League validity. He's probably looking at it himself and saying, listen, I'm only going to go to a club right now. Look, he's at Napoli. He's at a big club. For as much as he's had friction right now, he's still at a big club. He's gone on and he's won in different leagues. So for him to move at this point, he's 24, I believe, if my maths is correct. So, he's going to go and want to go to a league that he hasn't completed, which is very difficult, having one Liga and having one Serie A. And by the way, he did go and compete at Wolfsburg, for people that don't know. So he has had time in the Bundesliga. So you're looking at a player who, there's not many leagues left that he hasn't done. There's not many clubs left that can afford a 300K wage, by the way, that are in the Champions League. And how many clubs then also have a free starting 9 spot? Even PSG. I think a big reason why PSG haven't completed, by the way, nothing to do with money. Guys, they have almost £200 million worth of striking talent on the books right now. And I don't care if you've got all the money in the world, it's not feasible to have £300 million worth of striking talent on the books. And so that's going to be a difficult until they're able to move over Ramos or Colomwani. So for me, the list of clubs that are able to actually feasibly get Osimhen is small. And then the list of clubs that Osimhen would want to go to is even smaller. It essentially leaves Real Madrid, it leaves Arsenal, leaves PSG, and that's it. I mean, who can support a starting 9, pay the kind of wages, and pay the amount of money, and be in the Champions League, and meet all those criteria? It's a very small list.
Yeah. Do you know what? And that's a very good answer. I actually do want to move on to some of the names, because I know people will be dying to just get some, just some quick thoughts on and there are a lot of names. This is why I'm like, just pick your poison. Okay, no one's perfect, but pick one, because surely they've got to add something. And we've got some great questions that will touch on some of these names, but let me throw some out to you all first. It feels like an obvious one. I think this guy's flawed as well, and I also don't think it's doable in this window. But Nico Williams, is that a player you guys would be excited about if we signed? Ben, would you be happy if we brought him in? Like, does that feel like a... So for sure, you're going, but I'm like, he's clearly very good. And what I love about him is he's kind of two-footed, isn't he? So he can play on the right and the left. Yeah. That's the kind of thing I really like about him. And his stock is up there. And clearly, if Arteta loves him, then I need to love him, because he's clearly brilliant. But I just, watching him, I was blown away with his performance against Italy. But I didn't think he was great in every game at the Euros. But obviously got the big goal in the final. He's not blessed with blistering pace. He's not like ultra rapid where you think, wow, like don't leave any space because it will hurt you. So that's what I mean by slightly flawed. And obviously, I agree with everything Troy said. Well, if he's the guy, pay him what he wants. I don't care. But is that a player you'd be excited about, Ben?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's not necessarily that about what he comes in to do straight away.
There we go. The laptop agrees with you. Carry on.
For me with Williams, there's two sides to it. Firstly, I think he's a great player, but I also think he's become a tad overrated because of the Euros. That's not me saying that I don't think he's good. I think it's because he had a purple patch when everyone's watching. It's the same with the Champions League. If you have one stinker in the semi-finals, suddenly you're a terrible player. What happened with Zubamendi? And then later on, he has a great game against England, and now he's the best midfielder in the world. So I think if you look at the performances he had towards the end of the Euros and look at him in the season for Athletic Club, he's not had as many at that level, and he's still inconsistent. But I also think the system that they play is more transitional based compared to others. But I think if you look at the raw profile of the player and plug it into our system, he's almost perfect for what we would want as a winger. He's not really at that level right now where he's going to be like world class, but I think he offers a different solution that we don't have in terms of his 1v1 ability, his directness. He can play both sides, both footed. He's decent in duels as well, like good body usage. And we're looking at someone then who could play on the right and challenge Saka, can start on the left. And so you've got Saka and Williams. For me, it's like a perfect signing. And the important thing is, I think with Saka on the right, you've got someone, he's our right winger, that's fine. On the left, there's still a question. And if you get someone like Williams or a profile that can play both, it leaves the left wing open to go splash 100 mil on whoever it will be, a big name winger in the future. And that might end up being a striker instead, but with Williams, it could easily be him or it could be another winger. And I'm quite big on, like, if you're going to buy a player, you have to think about what that means for other players. If you, for example, you wanted Isaac as your main number 9, and then you go and buy Osimhen now, well, that's ruled him out. So that's not happening later on. So that's where I think with some of these, it'll be good. But there are other options. He's not the only winger in the world. So I'm not going to fixate too much on him.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Let's throw some names. I've grouped these three together because they are wingers that at one point were rated so highly, at one point were loved for their blistering pace, and are now looking to leave big clubs. That maybe once upon a time we really liked them. Raheem Sterling, Kingsley Coman, and is it Federico Chiesa? Is it Federico? I should know this, I'm Italian. What's his first name? Is it Federico?
Yeah.
Mum's going to kill me. Anyway, the three of them. If you were ranking them, George, I'd love to get Ben and Shroy's thoughts on this as well, but if you're ranking them, and also are there any three that you think not just you take, but can make a big difference?
So of those three, I think Kingsley Coman has the best quality, but really big feasibility concerns in terms of not just the wages. He's somebody that is genuinely injury prone. You can't escape that. He's somebody that's going to be commanding huge wages. For example, if I was to get Arsenal's perfect winger, I would argue a fit young Kingsley Coman is exactly what this Arsenal team is crying out for. Yeah. And Kingsley Coman hasn't lost any of the explosivity either. The problem is he just can't stay fit. And so that's the issue with me. Now, I mean, Bayern are offering a very easy solution here. They're saying you can have him on loan without even an obligation. And my eyes start to say, oh, okay, I don't even have to agree to sign you permanently and you're going to give him to me that way. I start saying, where's the lose situation there? I don't see one. But outside of that, I think Raheem Sterling's an interesting one. I don't think he's as bad as what everybody would have you believe in social media, particularly in the current market. But if your question has been transition inevitability and box efficiency, and you're asking Raheem Sterling at any point in his career to give you those certainties, I'm not sure that he has ever done that, even in his best moments at Manchester City. So again, but it's a winger that Mikel has worked for. So I thought I'd put him maybe slightly below Kingsley Coman. And I would round out with Chiesa last personally. Probably the best price to quality signing of the three that you mentioned. So low in price. His quality doesn't deserve to be £45 million less than the other three in terms of the overall package. The issues that I've got with Chiesa a little bit more are I do think that the injuries have capped his kind of potential a little bit. Whenever I've watched him, I still think he's quite explosive off a start, but in terms of his ability to really carry that power through over 10 to 15 yards, I feel that he slows down, and I feel that he doesn't quite have that in his locker anymore. And that, to me, was really the main reason I would want a winger. In general, like, I need to have that running power.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a little bit more of a physical cap that I think he will never get back, which is why I probably rank him a little bit less. The other two, for me, they have the quality and in moments the issue that I would want solved. But Chiesa, I don't think, can ever get there physically. And there will always be a cap at this point. But probably has the best price. And if you're asking yourself, if we're buying a flawed player, can you go wrong with a flawed player at 15 million euros? I don't think you can.
Yeah, that's a really interesting breakdown of the three. I mean, Shiroi, after that, who would you pick of the three? Right now, you're Arteta. Edu's walked in. He's presented you these three options. He's saying, listen, we couldn't get Nico Williams done, and Osimhen's going Chelsea. Well, is there one of those three you pick, and who would it be?
If only Arteta was coming up to me explaining the rationale as to why we're signing a player, right? My God, what a blessing. Look, I don't think I'd understand any of it. I'd probably be like, okay, Mikel, thanks. I'm going Coman, Raphinha, Chiesa, and look, it's really
Raphinha. You're chucking Raphinha in there. Fair enough.
Yeah, and I say that because
I really like Raphinha, to be fair.
Yeah, would he be your number one, George?
Of those options, yeah, he would. He would.
Okay. Let's see if your rationale is the same as mine. I think Coman and Raphinha will make fullbacks shit themselves. Just the notion that they would be on the pitch, and I say that through the lens of what I saw against Aston Villa. This isn't me writing Martinelli off. I think he could be fantastic if he returns to the heights that we had previously seen him as and hones things in. I have to preface that before I get abused in the comments. But I saw Martinelli intentionally left wide open by that Unai Emery side, on the shoulder, move after move after move, because they all knew that they had to mark our midfielders and press them out of the game, because that was our main threat. They knew they had to mark Odegaard and they had to double up on Saka too. So they perceived them as a threat. They made a conscious decision to leave Martinelli open, and they said, even if he does get the ball, we back ourselves to deal with it. And that did not change when a young fullback came onto the pitch. I personally don't think that if you have Coman or Raphinha on either flank, anyone takes that risk to leave them wide open. And I think that impacts our attacking balance so much. And I think when you're looking at Coman and Raphinha also, I do think that you've got the level of versatility, and I think they would be just as content to be rotated in the Premier League and the other tournaments. Let's not forget, we have a lot of Champions League games that people bang on about, and we absolutely need to come out of the season with a trophy. Otherwise, things are going to get quite scathing, given the amount of time that we haven't won anything. So we have to take those competitions quite seriously. I think they'd be happy with the level of rotation that you see with a Bernardo Silva or a Gundogan or a Phil Foden at Man City. Does anyone say that those players aren't important players? Wouldn't contribute to trophies? Bollocks. But they're not starters week in, week out, right? There's this notion that, oh my God, but if you buy this person, where are you going to accommodate them? We need to get that out of our heads too. That is not how these teams win trophies, right? So obviously, if you get Osimhen, he is your starting nine. Quite rightly, I get that because of the absolute golfing class. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with buying a more than capable player that can fill stopgaps in different competitions. That was a long way of me saying, I want someone, if we're getting a winger, that's going to make managers think when they play us and make fullbacks shit themselves, the X-factor player. And that's why Nico Williams is my top choice, even though he wasn't on the list you gave me. It is this idea that how do I stop him? Is he going to go down the outside? Is he going to cut in? Is he is it an underlap? Is he just going to blitz one from 30 yards? The guy's chaos. And that's exactly what we need.
Yeah.
I think really quickly on Raphinha, for me, he is one of the few players in the market that will buy into the out of possession philosophy that these wingers will have, which, by the way, no one talks about. When you talk about recruiting a winger, guys, the winger position out of possession for Arsenal is probably the most demanding job in world football. And he's probably the most humblest winger on the market that would actually do that. And then beyond that, he carries a level of quality that this team does not have in wide areas from a crossing perspective. We don't have a person of his final ball, period, in the squad. So when you're talking about those transition moments, let's just take Villa, that chance that Martinelli has in the first 5 minutes. Raphinha is delivering that on a sixpence to Saka in transition, and boom, that's a goal. And that's the level of inevitability that he carries. So for me, even though he's not best off the left, he's still, or Raphinha rather on the left, is still a better iteration and more consistent performer of actions in transition than 90% of maybe more naturally right-footed left wingers that we can have on the market.
Yeah, so I mean, and there are options. And like I said, by the time this podcast come out, This is going to sound weird. I mean, hopefully we've got an update on the winger because we obviously want that player in. But could you just let us know a little bit after the podcast about Arsenal? That would be great. Well, David Ornstein, so I should really be telling this. 15 minutes left of this pod. You guys have been fantastic. Ben, let's come to you and everyone chip in here. We want some names, right? Some other names. I mean, we mentioned Sterling, Coman, Chiesa, Raphinha, Williams. Well, we could go down the route of Ivan Toney discussion, Gyökeres, but I think we've kind of talked about the striker position. But, you know, are there people we're missing? Are there people that just me, who just kind of scrolls through the first couple players on Football Manager, is going to miss? Like, this is what I want to know. And we'll go through some questions as well. One of them was about Skov Olsen. If I just go through my likes, there we go. Typically the app likes to refresh. AFC.Pat has asked about Skov Olsen, who of course he did a thread on. What about him, and what about other players that you think you could recommend?
Yeah, one thing I'll just to add on what we were spoken about before. Yep. For me, Raphinha is like, he would, I think, have the biggest impact, and I think he's someone who a lot of people worry about him on the left. Some of his games last season, the Champions League, scored 2 against Napoli, scored 2 against Barcelona off the left. And he's someone that offers a different type of thing, where the one thing I like about him compared to other wingers is his final ball, which we're losing Vieira. We don't have a final ball specialist. And him in that right half space, if he was on the right for Saka, or on the left, early crosses into the box, Havertz arriving into the box, you can see that working perfectly. And Premier League experience, I've got a bit of a thing I've got family who are Leeds fans, so I've watched a lot of Raphinha, and the guy carried the team. Like, the amount of defensive work he did was ridiculous. And I just feel like he's the type that you can rely on. If the game is going against you, he's the one that will step up. So if you're comparing him to Williams, you'd have the biggest impact now, but Williams the highest ceiling. Other names, so you mentioned Skov Olsen. He's a nice solution. When I saw that, my first thing, I genuinely laughed. I was like, of course, out of every manager, Arteta wants a 6'2" winger. But he's very fit. He's very physical. Got really good left foot in terms of finishing, shoot from distance. Decent on his right. It's one of those that you probably work on more. I think a lot of players are decent off their weak foot, but it's not a focus for them and their manager. Whereas Arteta, you can see with how Saka and has really improved on that. I think he would focus on him more. He's not someone. He's playing a variety of positions, like more central as a striker at times, a bit deeper. He's not someone I've seen play on the left a lot. I was going to do a bit of a deep dive into him at some point soon, probably tonight, to be honest. But he's not got the blistering pace. He's a decent creator. He's more like, for me, I would be okay with him if we got another striker or winger, like a bigger name there. I would be okay with him, because I really think we need a backup for Saka, and we've been speaking about it for years. It seems like 2-3 years, and there's still no obvious option. So I would like him, but for me, he's a lot lower down the list. I like the guys. I really like Bakayoko, but my issue with him is I don't think he would want to come in and play on the left. I've seen him play on the left. He played there only twice. Had a real dig to try and find it, and he looked good off there. But the issue was he's very associative. He likes to come inside, and the issue then is we don't have a marauding left back. Maybe Calafiori will become a heavy overlapper, but he's still not going to be like a really direct left back for that to work. And then the Premier League option is, for me, Adingra. I really like him. Well, the thing is, if you look at what George is saying about the out of possession work, 2 wingers for me, one, is he really a winger, are Kvaratskhelia and Kudus, where to me, they're like the perfect options. If you're going to have someone that can play on just the left, Kvaratskhelia does all of that. If you want someone who can play on both and can play midfield, it's Kudus. Just, they're not happening.
I'm sorry to cut you there.
Yeah, go on.
I think obviously the Mbappes and Haalands of the world aside, you might all think this is so dramatic. I don't know if there's a player I want more than Kudus. I know that might sound really extreme, but and you're thinking West Ham's winger is playing on the left because he can't play on the right head of Bowen. But like, I think I just believe he's ready to have that Mane level explosion. And Mane at Liverpool, I hated him, so good against us. And I won't forget the odd, on Tierney. But I think he was so underrated. And he was so rated, but for me, underrated because of what Salah did. And then, Diaz comes in and kills it. So they moved him to the central position of the front three. And I feel like Kudus is ready for a massive jump. I look at some of the goals he scored for West Ham. I look at his ability to play central, out on the right in the touchline, in the pockets, out on the left. I love him. And I almost think a bit of a dream sign of mine would have been for us to just pay that release clause before it expired, which reportedly has expired. I'd have loved Arsenal to have done that. But I mean, I'm sure you guys will probably mention a load of names now going, really, ahead of this and him and blah, blah. And I'll be going, okay, fair enough. But of the ones that felt maybe not easy to sign, but somewhat gettable with some real work behind it, yeah, I loved Kudus. It's just a shame that, if anything, it's one for another window. Anyone else share my love for Kudus, which I think is a bit random?
Yeah, 100% for me. I'll let everyone else go. But yeah, for me, when we were linked with Ajax, I was like, get him now, because he had games at striker, right wing, left wing, centre mid, number 10, and ran the show. And I'm like, that guy has the perfect blend of physicality and technical ability, both-footedness. Even like that goal on the last day of the season, I was like, it's written. Kudus is going to win us the title, then join us in the summer. None of it happened. So sorry, guys, I probably jinxed it, but yeah.
Yeah, George, would you be keen on the Kudus deal?
I think I would have been keen last summer, not now. Like, he's just not for me feasible. And I don't know if he as a profile would have solved what I ultimately would have wanted on the left. I think for me, he's more of a right-hand sided player. Not that he can't play on the left, but it's a lot more in the sense that if he's a right central midfielder, even when he used to play false nine, he would like to drop in the right half space to open up on a strong foot to then carry through. And he gives you a little bit of, if Saka wasn't playing, what Saka could give you in terms of that magical dribbling, but ultimately creative mind. Like, I look at Kudus, and for me, he's a really great associative player. And I was looking a little bit more for a big space runner to complement what for me felt like our front line was really ball to feet heavy, ultimately. So I love him. I just don't know if he's solving the hole that I ultimately wanted. I have another name on a player that's definitely a prospect, and because he's somebody that we did on the Canon podcast, which I really like, and his name's Osimhen Diao, who plays for Real Betis. And he is much more the type of profile player I would be looking at. Quick breakdown, he's 6'1", big two-way winger. If you're looking at somebody that has some of that more traditional pace and power type, this is what Diao offers. He's got that early Gareth Bale-esque explosion that I feel like is going to come. He's a really exciting winger. He's 18, incredibly raw, not going to be ready right now. But in terms of the actual type, you're looking at a player that I think can actually frighten you in big spaces, but also has that Spanish flair that can receive in tight spaces. He's not somebody that doesn't know how to control the ball when pressed. And I do think he's also somebody that is quite diligent out of possession too. The way that Betis operates, he's effectively more of a left wing in a more traditional 4-4-2 at times. And, he really drops back and does a lot of work there. So he fills a lot of the things that I would like. But again, he's a prospect, and I have to be fair and consistent. If I feel that I need to make a now type signing, I don't think you can expect Diao to be the guy. I have no doubt that he'll be the person in 2 to 3 years, but right now, I don't know if he can be. But he's got a lot of the qualities you would like. Brilliant ball striking off both feet, can operate left, right, 6'1", tall winger, that's two-way, and a big space runner. So check in terms of skill, but not check in the biggest category that we might need, which is experience.
Sure,
I'm thinking about what you're saying, the now type signing, right? And let's not forget where we are in the window. the fact that people are going to hold you to ransom because they know you've let players go, the fact that we often look at a particular age profile, the fact that we're talking about ideally a player that might have shown even in glimpses that they can do it in the Premier League, someone who could start but might be content to act as backup, and a club that you have a relatively decent relationship with in terms of ultimately you'd be strong-arming someone to sell a player that they don't necessarily want to sell now. I am looking at Adingra at Brighton. And James, you'll attest to this. This isn't someone that I'm just naming now. I've been mentioning it for a little while as a solution where you absolutely can't get the £100 million winger that you want. I really do think he is a feasible option that gets you closer. He's not for me a player that guarantees you the league, but I've already said that I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle where I don't really think there are many players that do guarantee you the league, right? I don't think Raphinha guarantees us the league. I don't think Coman guarantees us the league. I don't think any of them make me go, we will win the league. But right now, I believe that we can. I'm not that pessimistic, but I really do think Adingra is someone that if Arsenal come along and Edu invites him and his partner to dinner in the same way that Arteta did with Mikel Merino and his, maybe we can get it done. Turn on the charm, And look, you're looking at Kudus, right? I mean, as positive as we've been about the business that Arsenal have done, there are a fair few of these players. You look at the club that they went to, the amount that people paid for them and what they're reportedly worth now. You look at Kudus, you look at Bruno Guimaraes, you look at Isak. There are a few, right, where you look and go, bloody hell, we're crying out for a player like that. And look at what they got them for. And we actually needed to fill that hole around the same time that they plugged that hole in the window, right? So there is an element of, do you want to miss out on the next one too? When suddenly next year someone else picks him up and he's worth 100 mil? We're so preoccupied with this idea of a big name. We want someone who's done it for 3 or 4 seasons, but we also want someone who's young enough to develop with us. We want someone who's not going to break the wage structure, but we want someone who's going to bring us closer to winning the Premier League and is the big name. There's all of these things, right? I think an element of pragmatism has to be used now. And for me, honestly, the now type signing is actually Adingra.
I'd be interested to see. I do want to just address very quickly some of the comments that came in. Thank you to everyone, because I haven't done this before for guests that come on the show. I really wanted people to try and inspire what we talk about on the show. Everyone, even if I haven't read your comment out, trust me, I went through them, and a lot of the players we've talked about, I mean, you'd have heard gone through a lot of names. So like AFC Pat mentioning Skov Olsen, I read that question out. We did talk about the Chiesa deal. Harry Prashant, thank you for your comment. Was asking about Chiesa deal at around 15 million and Adingra. Of course, we talked about those players. AFC Matt was asking about will Sterling deliver for us if we do go ahead and buy him? Actually, let's just do that as a quick yes or no. If we sign Sterling, would he deliver for us, Ben?
Yes.
Yeah, George?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Shiroi?
I hate to be the lawyer, but it depends on what you mean by deliver for us. I think he could.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Act as feasible backup if you manage his minutes, but he's not clinical enough for me, and we've seen that for a long time, and that for me was our biggest problem. So I actually would say no.
I think he would. I think he would give us more pace. I don't believe he's really lost much of that. I think he'll play left and right, and I think he would keep the players in the squad competitive because an informed Sterling does kick some of those players out. So I think that's what we need the wing at the bare minimum to do. But is he the signing that makes me go, we will win the league, which circles all the way back to the beginning? No, I wouldn't say they're going, no, we're going to win the league. I know, I'm really confident because we signed Raheem Sterling, but I definitely think he could improve us. So thank you all for the comments that came in via X. If you did comment and you're listening to this, big thank you. Ben, I just want to say a huge thank you for jumping on, and where can everyone find you?
Just on Twitter or X, Ben_Mattinson_. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
No, absolute pleasure. Your insight's been fantastic, as is yours, George. Where can everyone find you? Of course, the Amazing Canon podcast, and where else?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on Twitter at GeorgeV_AFC. And as you said, our Web Canon podcast are places you can find me.
Fantastic. Honestly, you two keep up the amazing work, because a lot of people will watch sort of a 10-minute comp and pretend they're experts on a player. Like the level of insight, and as is proven by how many of these players you've backed over the years that have come through. So yeah, just keep up the great work. Shiroi's voice, loving the podcast, coming out regularly. yeah, great viewership, great comments as well. Keep up the great work, Sharoy. And also you got a show coming with Turkish. Tell everyone about that. Well, have I ruined it? Am I not meant to announce that yet? Turkish.
Yeah, I don't actually know if that was meant to be a public thing, but yeah, hopefully we have something in the pipeline pretty soon.
He'll forgive me. There should or might be a Sharoy in Turkish, something happening on Turkish.
There will be soon. And look, I completely echo what James was saying. You both, honestly, incredible. That was a very, very fun and informative hour. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Everyone, by the time you made it to the end of this podcast, there's every chance that everything we've said has been made redundant by David Ornstein delivering a bomber that we didn't need or do need, depends which way you want to look at it. But show some love in the comments for our amazing guests. And yeah, of course, there'll be more content coming out on the Goonerverse. Let's see what Arsenal do. Friday's the deadline. There'll be plenty to talk about and plenty of live streams to keep you up to date with everything going on in this manic world of Arsenal, because we've only got a few days left to really make it count. See you all in a bit. Really hope you've enjoyed another episode of the Goonerverse podcast with Arsenal fans from around the Arsenal world giving their amazing thoughts. A big thanks to our guest today. If you do want to follow this podcast on the go, you can. It's available on podcast platforms as well. Join us next week where we'll get more Arsenal fans to talk all things Arsenal. A big thank you again.